Hello, good evening. It's Adil Fazal here, market analyst at CFDs.com, bringing you a review of the FTSE 100 end of day market analysis, the Wednesday 9th of December 2015. Okay, let's try and decipher this in terms of price action. Currently, the market has dipped below 6090 and is certainly falling very, very fast. Okay, now this video has been brought to you by CFDs.com. Be sure to visit the website www.cfds.com. Alternatively, visit the educational website to certainly learn more. Okay, let's try and decipher and understand exactly what's going on here. Volatility index generally is the first port of call. Now, the FTSE volatility at present, you do have resistance up here at 18.5 and 17.5. So, given the fact that we did have a potential topping tail and reversal, you are looking for the volatility index to certainly move lower, which obviously means the FTSE 100 needs to move higher. Okay, so the volatility index generally is a good gauge. Now, the other gauge as well, obviously, given the fact that everything is focused solely on oil at present. If I just bring up a chart of crude as well, and obviously Brent. So bear with me whilst I just locate that. Okay, so we are here. Bear with me. Okie dokie, right, so if I go to the monthly view of Brent, and you can clearly see here on the monthly view on Brent that we certainly have a potential double bottom scenario, which in turn supports the thesis that FTSE 100 is going to bottom and potentially bounce as well. Okay, so bear that in mind. Going to a weekly chart, you can see that we are continuing to make lower lows and lower highs. So again, that certainly needs to be taken into consideration as well in terms of price action. Now going over to crude, because again this whole market is based on the fact that it's moving in tandem with the price of oil. Okay, now on a monthly chart, crude oil certainly remains weak and is below the key level of support, which is at 46. So certainly an argument to certainly potentially move lower. Okay, so again that certainly needs to be taken into consideration. Now obviously you had the double bottom support at 39, that certainly has cracked and certainly broken lower, and therefore it is a concern. Okay, and therefore one would argue that that would send the FTSE 100 lower. Okay, based on the fact that you are looking at crude oil solely. But from my understanding or my interpretation is the fact that you do have a potential double bottom now on crude at the $36 level, and given the fact that Brent is obviously into support, that would then support the argument that the oil price would certainly start to move higher. Now, not only that, you also have the chart of the dollar. Now, the dollar index is the important variable that we need to take into consideration here. So if I just bring up the chart of the dollar index as well. Okay, so we certainly have this bear flag formation, the dollar index. Now, we had the dollar index obviously being crushed yesterday, and it's the reason why it explains why the euro is currently at 1.01, and it certainly is certainly moving higher. So given the fact that the dollar has obviously fallen quite substantially, the price of oil should in turn move indirectly or inversely to that. So therefore you are looking at a further weakness, and you are looking at the dollar index certainly coming lower, testing the 200 MA potentially, or even lower. So therefore one would argue the dollar index is certainly looking weak, and therefore commodities should certainly catch a bid here, from my understanding and my interpretation. And I expected that yesterday as well to a large extent. Okay, I did expect that yesterday, and I expected that thrust, especially given the fact that you have the oil and gas sector. If I just bring that up, you can see that we are holding this bottom on the FTSE 350 oil and gas sector. So therefore, given the fact that oil, obviously Brent is at double bottom on the monthly chart, on the 60-minute chart we're approaching double bottom again, and given the fact that the dollar itself remains weak, therefore one would argue that commodities are best placed to certainly move higher. Okay, that's my interpretation thus far. Now the mining sector, now that's a totally different story, and that certainly is weak, and one can't argue to the contrary. It's very hard to argue to the contrary, but given the fact that you've broken out that key weekly pivotal support. Now again, given the fact that Chinese inflation certainly came out weaker, and that certainly supports more stimulus, etc. Well, not weaker, but basically more or less in line, but not strong enough to deter any potential further rate cuts, which obviously is expected. That in and of itself should help the market. Now, the other factor as well in terms of the FTSE 100, now given the fact that we are looking at intermarket analysis, the German DAX has actually closed the gap at 10,500, okay? And given the fact that the German DAX has closed the gap at 10,500, that generally signifies and alerts to you to a potential reversal in European indices, which in turn obviously will help the actual FTSE 100 itself as well. So certainly interesting insight there. Okay, now in terms of the actual price of copper, I'll bring up the chart of copper for you as well. On a daily chart, we certainly seem to be consolidating. We haven't made a lower low, and nor have we made a lower high. It's just basically consolidating sideways. Given the fact that the dollar itself has started to move lower, I do expect the price of copper certainly chart itself to certainly start to move higher as well, especially given the fact that you have this potential inverted head and shoulders formation as well. Okay, so again, it's something that you need to adhere to. If anything, you have a higher low, okay, rather than a lower low, and therefore you are looking for a potential thrust higher. That's my interpretation thus far in terms of the actual market itself. Okay, now again, the dollar has a double-edged sword, because the dollar starts to fall and the euro starts to rise, then we know that European equities can get hurt quite substantially. So again, that's certainly a factor, or certainly a variable in the equation that you need to take into consideration as well. Okay, but given the fact that Mr. Draghi obviously has asserted himself to doing everything he can, okay, then it basically means that the euro will remain weak regardless. Even if we do certainly get a bout of dollar weakness, the euro will remain weak regardless, and therefore it supports European equities higher. So again, there are counter arguments to them. Okay, recently Mr. Wiedemann has come out with several anti-QE comments, and that certainly is sending the euro higher, and that's obviously hurting European equities to a large extent. Okay, now again, Mr. Draghi is in damage control, and expect him to come into damage control at any time, and certainly attempt to talk the euro down regardless of a weaker dollar. Okay, now in terms of the FTSE 100, again going back, let's go look and observe the actual index itself now. Looking at a weekly chart, you can see that we are coming into key pivotal support on the diagonal trend line and horizontal support. Daily chart, same scenario here. Again, horizontal double bottom is 6080 support. So again, observe and watch out for that. Now you do have double bottom support, that's 5900. If the market certainly starts to get obliterated, let's just put it that way. Now we have hit a pivot low, given the fact that we have hit a pivot low of 6060 thus far on the FTSE. This is after hours, given the fact that they are sensitive to US indices. Then you are looking at potential weakness here on the FTSE 100. Now the key is, will it stay above the 6080 level? If the FTSE itself closes today after hours above 6080, then the bull's certainly back in control and we start to move higher. If we close below 6080, then it is a real cause for concern. Okay, so again, that's something that we're going to watch. Now, in terms of economic data itself, yes, we had the wholesale inventory certainly miss in the US, and we had weaker import and export data out of Germany itself. Now, we also had some negative news with regards to the FTSE 100 this morning as well, where BCC downgraded growth forecasts. So again, that certainly hurt the FTSE to a large extent as well. But again, it's all about oil. Okay, that's basically, it's a commodity route. Commodities are certainly being hurt quite substantially, and this is why we're seeing weakness in the actual markets themselves. Okay, so again, FTSE 100, it's 6080. That certainly needs to hold. If that can hold, then we can start to mount quite a substantial rally on the back of dollar weakness. Okay, and that certainly will obviously propel higher, and obviously oil rally as well. Given the fact that the copper chart, which I've shown you, is certainly stabilizing and putting in support, and if oil prices can do so too, then we are looking at a potential rally further higher. Looking at the 60-minute chart of the FTSE 100, we actually were making a attempted rally on the FTSE, and that failed. As you can see, the bearish engulfing candle going into the close. You had the support at 6100 intraday, and then obviously the pivot low support on the 16th of November, which was at 6080. Again, those two support zones remain, okay, on the FTSE 100. If that were to go, then you are looking at 6050 on the FTSE itself. Very, very weak regardless, okay. So 10-minute chart of the FTSE, you were putting in a potential inverted head and shoulders formation, hence the reason why I was starting to get bullish, potentially even entertaining an idea of being bullish, and the market obviously has told us otherwise so far. Now again, the market did close at the 6130 level. We're currently trading at the 6060 level, so quite a substantial fall, and that obviously negates the inverted head and shoulders pattern, given the fact that the head is at 6100. Now I was expecting an inverted head and shoulders reversal pattern here, given the fact that you have your neckline at 6170, you have your head at 6100, so you're looking for a 70-point rally, and you were looking for 6220, where it basically equates to previous support equals resistance. Okay, and that certainly was the game in town to a large extent. Okay, so again, this is an interesting scenario. Okay, so inverted head and shoulders on the FTSE. That's what was expected to play out. Obviously, the market has other ideas thus far. Again, 6050 will be key on the FTSE, and we certainly seem to be hitting that as I upload this video or attempt to upload this video. So again, interesting how those levels are certainly coming into play already. Going back to your daily chart, given the fact that we're at 6050 now, again, you do have potential support down here, which is 6030. That's your key level of support, or certain quite a substantial 6030 down to 6020. Again, they are the levels of support on the FTSE 100. Now, going back historically, you obviously had that 6070 level that was breached. You have a pivot low here, again at 6020. So again, you have previous resistance equals support, previous resistance equals support. So just basically real areas of contention on the FTSE 100. So you have multiple zones of support here now at the 6040 level, 6050 level, substantial amount of support. Okay, so it's about how the market reacts but thereafter. So this is going to be very interesting on the FTSE 100 if this commodity route continues or obviously starts to reverse. That's the key. Okay, looking at Glencore, we had Glencore into gap fill. So again, hence the reason why my bias was on the verge of buying the dip as opposed to shorting the rips. Okay, so again, Glencore certainly coming into potential support. The S&P 500. The S&P 500 on a 10-minute chart obviously had this gap fill was at 2050. Obviously, it's decided to go even further. We had this inverted head and shoulders continuation pattern. You can see after the pivot high at 2080, the market obviously has put in a low at 2040. This is one hell of a sell-off. Okay, so again, interesting scenario. Daily chart, again, if we fail to hold that pivot low at 2040 in 42 intraday, then the next support level on the S&P is going to be 2020. And this certainly does remain weak. It certainly is a cause for concern given the fact that the green candle has failed to hold. So again, all eyes on the markets and see how they react going into tonight's session on the S&P 500. Now, in terms of the banking sector, we did have support, potential support on the banking sector. We certainly have pushed below, but we are looking at potential support here, certainly holding. If that doji candle holds true, we shall see how that market reacts tomorrow. Telecoms, pharmaceuticals certainly under pressure. Retail sector again coming back into support. Hence the reason why my bias was on the bullish side, and I was expecting a move higher. So this market certainly is set up from I'd say from a fundamental perspective. Given the fact that you have a weaker dollar, you have oil prices now coming into support. If they can stabilize, copper is certainly stabilized. Given the fact that the FTSE now is potentially into key support around this 6100, 6080 level. If those two zones can hold going into tomorrow, into the cash market, then you are looking at a bullish FTSE 100. Okay, so again, this certainly is a tricky question. On the weekly chart, if you are a long-term trader, which was a question that was posed to me, yes, you do have a concern. If this pivot low at 30 on the FTSE, bear with me 1 second, let me just bring up the correct chart, not the FTSE. Okay, daily chart itself, looking at the weekly, it's all about this support here now at 6080. If that fails to go, then you are looking at 6,000, 6,100, potentially even 5,900 as well. So certainly a scary thought, and it's not one that I would like to entertain for now. I'd like to entertain the fact that we are looking to potentially hold this support at the 6055 level, 6050 level, and that certainly should be the technically should be the pivot low of the day, from my understanding, given the fact that that level certainly comes up and up and again, especially a 6100 level. I didn't expect that to crack, and it certainly has. So again, I have to take the hats off to the bulls and say yes, well done. They certainly do have control of this market at present. So it's going to be very interesting how this market reacts tomorrow. Again, Euro USD will hold a key. USD JPY will certainly hold a key as well. If I had to go back to the chart of the Euro USD, I mean also the Aussie USD. I mean, look at the Aussie USD here. I mean, we certainly are basing here, and therefore risk is being embraced again. That's my interpretation of the Aussie itself, and therefore that should bode well for the FTSE 100. I am tempted to buy the FTSE here at 6060 for the 30-point stop, but again, we'll allow the markets to dictate. Again, looking at gold, it's consolidating, it's bullish, and therefore it should help commodities. So given the fact that the FTSE itself has sold off quite substantially, it is quite baffling. Okay, certainly quite baffling as to the actual sell-off itself. Okay, So I think that's a market wrap on the FTSE 100. Also, before I do go, just the FTSE 250. Again, you have consolidation here on the 60-minute chart, and you are looking for potential consolidation before the move higher. The daily chart, previous resistance equals support, so again supports the FTSE 100. Looking at the FTSE Europe itself, again in horizontal support, FTSE Euro top 100. Again, this is a key zone, given the fact that we are into that previous resistance equals support, and you have horizontal support below. Okay, now I think that's a sum up or good summary of the US markets. Again, that key level will come into play on the S&P 500 at 2040, and that's going to be interesting to see how the markets react. The amazement is the fact that we've taken out yesterday, well, not yesterday, but the pivot low on the 3rd of December. That really is a cause for concern. So again, that's going to be interesting to observe. My analysis or my summation is the FTSE is expected to go higher, provided we can hold that 6080 support zone. Okay, trade safe. Be sure to visit cfds.com for your trading needs. Goodbye now.